Okay, wow, I've just clicked start webinar and it's hit exactly 4 o'clock. So welcome to everyone who's joined. Thank you for coming along to our amazing new webinar for April, which is called Go for Growth, New Metrics for Event Organisers in 2024. And we are going to talk all about KPIs today and why you need to use them, why they're important. And I know we're probably all using them, but are they the right ones? Are they just the same KPIs that your leadership team have been using for years and years and years? And now it's time to probably review them given the current state of the world economy, which isn't looking great, but for some organisers, it's looking fantastic. And I was just talking to Sam before this webinar, and he was saying there's loads of deals going on out there. Loads of organisers are running some great shows, and other organisers want to acquire those shows. And what's that based on? Amazing growth metrics. Now, we're going to get into it. I have got a fantastic panel. A quick bit about me. I'm Hugh. I am the SVP of marketing at Grip. We are the AI-powered platform built for business relationships. We help you power your events to ensure that the right people meet at the right time in the right place. And my amazing panelists today include these great people. We've got Cara Turner, founder and director from Integrated Strategy. She's ex-Informa Markets. We got Sam Feary, who is from Plural Strategy. He's an associate director there. And we have Nicola Shaw, head of growth at Tag Digital. Right, I'm going to get them to introduce each other. I'm going to start with Cara. Can you tell us a little bit about you and why you think metrics are quite important for what you do in your business? Because obviously you were ex-Informa Markets, weren't you? And you've got a pretty mental job title when you were there, which is rather impressive. Former strategic commercial director at Digital at Informa Markets, which sounds incredible. So tell us a bit about your background, what you did at Informa, why you decided to leave and found a business which is probably focused a lot on metrics.
Absolutely, and we do love our long-winded, punchy titles. The higher up we go, but my role at Informa, I was with Informa formerly on the UBM brand of CPHI, which was UBM's leading event brand. And I've been working on that portfolio for over 10 years. So very well versed in vertical adaptation, geo adaptation, running a very large scale, powerful brand for a very large scale, powerful company. When COVID hit, obviously we became more interested in digital, like everyone, pivoting to safeguard our stand revenue. But also that fueled the love of data for me, because that just shone a light on the data we were accessing, how much webinars were increasing our engagement and our audience, and then coming back towards live events, how much it can actually enrich what we do, how we do it, how we pitch, and also how we leverage commercial spend. So I actually started Integrated Strategies based on the love of data and enabling event organisers to really make sure they're targeting the right KPIs, that the team are focused on growth in the right areas to really ensure that we can beat the downturn of ROI, which is reportedly 40% down by exhibitors globally in terms of their experience of the show. So that's a little bit about me and the reason why I founded my company and the reason that I really wanted to be here today to talk through some of these key points.
Lovely. Thank you for joining. Sam, can you tell me a bit about you and your background, please?
Absolutely, thanks. So, as you said, I'm Sam Feary, Associate Director at Plural Strategy, coming up to nearly 10 years at Plural now. And over that period of time, I've worked on a number of different pieces in the events field. For those that don't know, Plural has worked with a number of the major event organisers globally, as well as a number of kind of private equity or other companies that have been looking at the events markets. Over that time, working on kind of due diligence as well as strategy pieces for organisers. And for us at Plural, one of the big parts of the work that we do is we really believe in the value of putting forward the voice of the customer in a lot of the work that we do. And so understanding what are the best metrics for us to kind of clear and concisely put across our messages and put across that voice of the customer is a really important part to a lot of our work. So it's something we've put a lot of thought into over the time.
Great. Thanks for coming along to our webinar. Lovely to have you. Nicola, can you tell us a bit about you, please?
Yes, so I am the head of growth at Tag Digital. For anyone that's not aware, Tag Digital is a digital marketing agency that specialises with the events industry. So we're running digital marketing campaigns to help event organisers grow their events. So yeah, I've been working in digital for over 10 years and with Tag for over 5. So really specialising in the events industry for the last 5 years to really kind of help event organisers with the shift and the change and the trends that are happening with digital marketing, and a lot of the marketing efforts that are happening in order to grow your event year on year is now shifting towards digital. Traditional methods, especially after the pandemic, just aren't working anymore. So we're kind of helping support a lot of event organisers grow their registrations, their exhibitor leads, sponsorship sales and all things like that, and also helping them grow into new markets, new regions and things like that, all through data. Same as Cara, the reason that I love digital is because of the data behind it. It's the one marketing track that you can prove if it works or if it doesn't work. So it's why it's the easiest one to utilize when it comes to growing your event as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've got 3 great panelists. We've got Cara, who's got wealth of experience as an event organizer, now consultant. We've got Sam, who's got lots of experience with metrics when it comes to helping organizers sell and buy event businesses, so you can see the metrics that shows that events are working. And we've got Nicola, who really doubles down on the growth, the customer acquisition metrics. So a really great spectrum of panelists. Right, before we get into the actual nitty-gritty of the debate itself, I want to quickly give a message from our sponsor, which is us, which is we've got another webinar coming up. So please do scan the QR code, come along to that. This one's all ice cream themed. So basically it's all about churn. So we're challenging churn and we want to solve participant churn issues before it's too late on this next webinar, which is 22nd of May. We'll come in to talk about that a bit later on, but look forward to me telling you a bit about that. But scan it now, sign up. Lots of people who signed up to the last one when I promoted this one at the last webinar are now on this one now. So lots of people are getting value from them because they keep coming back for more. Right, let me stop sharing and let's actually get into the chat. Cara, tell me why are organizers really caring more about metrics now? I thought they've always used metrics, haven't they, to guide their shows. Why are they really dialing this up more? Why now? Is it something about the economic environment?
You're right. We've always cared about metrics. They tell us if we're successful or not. So that's our model. And I think one of the driving factors is actually that marketeers for the exhibitors that we're targeting, they're really being put under pressure to ensure that what they're spending is valuable, that the ROI is there, that there's a clear outcome from it. And I think this really comes from the pandemic and the fact that marketeers suddenly had to prove a lot more of what they were doing and how they were doing it, but also then had the metrics to back it up. And that
by marketeers there, sorry to jump in, do you mean exhibitors? So basically the people that are paying for the booths and things like that. We're not talking about the marketeers of the organisers. We're talking about the people who are actually giving the organisers the money in the first place.
Exactly. And the reason that I've started there is because they're our bread and butter, or one of the 3 aspects that are our bread and butter. You know, you've got your exhibitors, your attendees, and of course, you know, the venue where you're at. You need all 3 of them to work cohesively to put on a great event. And the reason that I've started with our exhibitor marketeers is because they're the ones that are driving more demand, I think, in terms of exhibition organisers showcasing, justifying and quantifying the return on investment that companies will have. At the same time, the marketeers that are responsible for event participation are having their budgets squeezed a little bit in favour of omnichannel experience and marketing in terms of general lead generation that's outside of our events. So you've got those 2 factors at play, and that's why I've led with that, because we've talked about, you know, events coming back. It's great, and we saw 21.8% growth on events last year, but we're still 13.8% behind our 2019 numbers in terms of event participation. And as I mentioned at the start, exhibitor-perceived ROI, this is coming from the exhibitor marketeers, is 40% down, the perceived value. Now, why I want to start there is that volume is still a great player. You know, so if you've got an event that's in the volume play, and we've seen Peter Jones from 19 Groups celebrate Retail Technology Show trading this week, some wonderful volume numbers. You still need value within those numbers. You still need that whole data story to say, yes, we're here, we're big, you know, we're bringing that ecosystem together, we're giving you that experience. But underneath, we've got these great players. We've got your buyers and your recommended specifiers here. And that's why I think our metrics are even more important now than they were before, because it's no longer enough just to put on event volume. You've got to showcase that you've got the right people there. And there's a lot of technology to do that, which is pros and cons of that. It can show your strength and your weakness. But how we shape that story is really important. So, you know, the KPIs that I think are important is really going back to basics and saying, well, who is the ecosystem that you want to bring together? Who are the, or how does that buyer and seller dynamic work? How much of that are we bringing to the table? And to Nicola's point, how much can we extend on that? How much can we do audience extension to really showcase the worth of people spending the money to exhibit the show? And more importantly, leverage that data for the upsell, be it sponsorship or digital engagement. So there's so much we could potentially do. We really need to be zoning our teams on those KPIs that are going to get our exhibitors interested, get their buy-in and get them actually engaging, because also exhibitors don't do that. They don't engage in our technologies when we put them forward. So we really need to be pressing the right buttons for them to really showcase these kind of metrics.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I've spoken to all of you separately, and we will come together as a group before this. And one thing that kind of speaks volumes is that there are a lot of organizers just doing the same thing, and they're doing the same thing every single year. And 5 years has passed and they haven't really reviewed that. Do we need to do things differently? Have we got new ways of capturing new metrics? I think, Sam, you know, you touched on this when we spoke around, you know, we got these different buckets for metrics, and it seems like there's a big bucket around acquisition, whether you're acquiring attendees, sponsors, exhibitors. There's another bucket which is around engagement. So, you know, how engaged are your attendees? Are your exhibitors coming back for a second year? I think you've got some strong viewpoints, haven't you, around metrics, and from what Cara is saying around who's the most important person in this whole value chain. It seems to me like, you know, if you haven't got the buyers, you haven't really got an event in the first place.
Well, I mean, I think that's definitely a strong starting point. I mean, I think we've definitely seen lots of what Cara was saying absolutely, you know, echo through. But I think when you're talking about understanding that you have those buyers, there's, especially for shows where you're serving a relatively complex ecosystem, defining the right buyers for the right people and making sure you have as much data as possible to understand what are people really here to do is really key to ensure that you can deliver on the best event experience. You know, you could easily have 3 different types of buyers with 4 different objectives. You know, someone's here for education, someone's here for product discovery, someone's here for sourcing. They're looking for parts compared to finished products. And if you don't understand the different objectives of what everyone's there to do, then it's going to be a lot harder to serve and really see those strong kind of commercial outcomes. And if you do have one of those shows, then, you know, with lots of organizers often struggle, you know, we as a group have discussed before about the struggle with, you've put in all the effort as an organizer to bring in this great audience, and then someone essentially books a hotel room across the street and tries to pull them in from your show. Even just pulling people out of your show as a bad start, but also they're getting the bad value from the work you've done without generating any revenue for you. And if you can start to understand more specifically, you know, whether this is through registration questions, post-show surveys to understand what it is that people are looking for, you can start to have much more tailored offerings. You know, the basic starting point could be that you've got a better designed show floor layout, but you could stretch it into on-site meetings. You could Hugh, we were obviously talking before with Grip, but you talk about, virtual meetings throughout the year, about how you could help to leverage people to make sure they're meeting with exactly the right people. You've got, I know Cara had plenty of metrics around, make sure you've got enough, and then going into it is make sure you've got enough of the right people for the right people. I've got plenty else to talk about customer satisfaction metrics in a little bit, but I don't want to kind of take up everyone's time to start with.
Yeah, it's very much around a balance. I see, Nicola, is the kind of like buyer, supplier. First of all, you need to understand who they are, what their objectives are, and not that it's completely weighted to one side. Because, if I'm a buyer, I don't want to go and see loads of suppliers pitching me. And equally the same, if you're a supplier, you don't want to go to an event and you're speaking to all your competitors. That's just a bit of a waste. So how do organizers solve for that in terms of this acquisition phase? Because you're big on that, aren't you, at Tag Digital?
Yeah. And I think like back to kind of what Cara was saying and what you were saying, Hugh, it's amazing how many people are still doing the same thing that they were trying to do back in 2019. And from like a marketing and an events perspective, it's a completely different world now. And I don't tell people even to compare the results back to 2019 anymore. It's completely different environment. So you've kind of got to like stop living in the past. And when it comes to like the data, as well as to really make sure that the actual buyers are there that you want to be there, it's relying on the data that you're actually getting from your events and actually utilizing that in a more effective way. So there's so many event organizers that are not utilizing the data for marketing purposes. So they're using the same audience targeting year on year. They're thinking the same, it worked last year, so let's see if it works this year. But they're not actually listening to their exhibitors and being like, did the right job titles of people actually turn up? Did the right audience, like how much business were they making, to be like, should I be tweaking my marketing and my like acquisition process in order to improve the quality of the audience that's going there? I think there's a lot of attitudes with event organizers around wanting volume, wanting these big numbers, hundreds of thousands of attendees and things like that. But at the end of the day, you're trying to please your exhibitors who want quality. So I think it's changing that. So it's utilizing the data of your events, like analyzing what job titles actually turned up and interacted at the event. What geolocations did your attendees actually come from? A lot of event organizers don't do enough research on what geolocations they're targeting when it comes to marketing. Some are like wanting to target the whole of the United States, but is that actually the people that are attending, and is it the people that are valuable who are attending for your exhibitors? So when it comes to actually doing the marketing there, it's using the data of when to pick and select the geolocations that you're doing. And a big one that a lot of event organizers forget is actually analyzing the content that people are engaging with at your events. If you've got speaker sessions and things like that going on, you actually need to analyze what was engaged with, what topics are people most interested in your event, and utilizing that within your marketing, because that's going to drive the quality audience of the visitors if you've got high quality topics that people are actually interested in, rather than just running speaker streams for the sake of it. So I think it's really utilizing that data that you have from your past events to grow your events quality going forward, rather than just repeating the same thing year on year.
Yeah, because I should think, if you're an organizer that runs the same event every year or variations of that event throughout the year in different geo locations, you've got this wealth of data you could be mining. Like, you'd be mad not to. If you've got, we often see competitors come along and they go, right, I want to be like that big insurance event. I'm going to launch a competitor one, but they haven't got any historical data. So why wouldn't you just lean into that historical data and use it to your benefit and just do more with it? But I find a lot of organizers, you're right, don't do it. Cara, where, if I'm an event organizer, I'm listening to all this stuff, I'm going, wow, there's a lot of things I could take away from what you're all saying. Where would I start? Where would I find some of these metrics? Would they be, you obviously done digital platforms. So would it be there? Would it be surveying? Would it be going through historical data that you might have on social media? How would you find some of these metrics to kind of learn from them and take action?
I'm smiling, Hugh, because you said something, because there's something that Sam said and something that Nicola said that I wanted to build on. I've waited for 6 weeks, almost 3 months for post-show reports before. And actually, I find the value of those quite, well, surface deep. They're not deep down, because surveys are great, but often people are responding based on what they think you want them to say. And I've even had that in one-to-one conversations. I've had to catch people up and say, well, hold on a minute, you said this, but I'm not quite linking the two. And that's not intentional. That's just human behavior. So I think where one of the shifts needs to be is relying less on surveys and traditional ways of gathering data and looking more at behavioral data, because that is telling you what really is happening. So to Nicola's point, if you're looking at content engagement, you'll actually see who is genuinely coming along to a webinar or a session. You'll be able to see, if you've tagged them correctly, where else they're going on that digital journey and how else they're engaging, who they're really interested in. And it's the behavioural aspect of our communities that we should be really looking at. And that's in real time. Why should I wait 6 weeks to up to 3 months for data that's in the past? That's no longer acceptable. And let's just think about this. 77% of B2B buyers actually expect personalized content. So the more that you can look at the behavioral data, the more that you can test it and engage with it, play around with it, actually be playful, the more you'll get that enrichment. And that works for that particular buyer, but that also works for your pitch to the market. Say, you know, this is who we've got coming, this is why it's relevant, and this is the leading trend in the market. We're going to be diving deeper into that at the show. There's so much of a story that event organisers can build around it. But then to come back to the point, why aren't they doing that? The traditional model of event curation, the event cycle, is fast-paced. That show is going to happen in 12 months, 10 months, 8 months time, whether you're ready or not. So the traditional wheels of making that happen are turning at such a pace that there's no time for event organisers to do anything different, because to actually engage on behavioural data takes time and effort. What we've said before, Sam, about, you know, making sure that you're connecting the right people at the right time through providing the right specialised content, that's exactly what I'm saying now, that it takes effort, it takes time. And it's not that quick fix, well, we're just going to, you know, spray and pray and go to market with a generic message and just aim for that volume pitch. But event organisers are almost compelled to do that because they're in a rush to get back to those numbers. Nicola, you're right, we shouldn't look at 2019 numbers, but event organisers are. You know, that's the goal. We want to do that and more. So there's two things happening there. There's the desire to change, but not having the time. To still go for that volume pitch, but not realizing that that could be detrimental. And the fact that actually digital engagement takes the effort and time and a playful, curious mindset, which is where I think all of us potentially can come in and support. You know, you've got the likes of GRIP and other digitally event supporting or associations are available. You have different consultants in terms of buying and selling. You've got people like Tag that are willing to do that extension, that engagement. So you almost have so many players in the market that are ready and willing to help you, that you need to make that conscious effort of saying, right, we're going to do what we're used to doing, but as a side, we're going to be tasking you guys with this particular piece so that we can naturally embed it in what we do. Without having to do the effort. Does that make sense? So if we're on the ground doing the legwork to get something up and running, we can then naturally segue into a new way of working for event organisers without disrupting that quick, we've got to go and we've got to get that volume play. So I don't know if that answers the question, but those were a few things that were coming up as the panelists were talking.
Yeah, I'd love one of you to chip in about, you know, real life examples. So is there an event that you've seen that have been using some of these new post 2019 metrics, shall we say? Can you give me some examples? You don't have to name names, but say, generic event X did Y would be quite cool. While you're doing that and you're thinking of it, Tim will probably fire me if I didn't tell you about Grip. And what we're doing in terms of these behavior metrics is, looking at the connections, who's connecting with each other through the meeting functionality that we have in Grip. We're also looking at, you have a schedule. You can personalize your own schedule for what you want to go and see in terms of the content streams. We can take that behavior data and see who's favoriting or which content streams or which sessions of people added into their agenda, who's interested in who. All of this behavior data is all very exciting, exhaust data, I suppose we call it, where a survey people sometimes will tell you what you want to hear, but behavior data is what they're really doing, which is what we care about. Anyway, so who's got some great tidbits of things they've seen in events that have been doing it well when it comes to metrics?
Well, I can do the opposite. I can share a lesson of what not to do.
Even better.
So when I was with Informa, we were very much looking at personalized content, trying to take that first step towards personalization, because we were very far from it and still are. But one of the tests that we did was actually thinking, well, let's hit our marketeers, our event marketeers, exhibiting marketeers, Q to be specific, with a digital how to market toolkit, in this new day and age. And we worked very hard on that, and we actually received over 22,000 impressions and engagement for this content piece, in comparison to it was pharma was the industry I was in, our pharma industry content, which was pitching at 7,000. And we celebrated, like, oh my gosh, look, we've done it. We've hit something here. We've got engagement. But as I stepped, and I was really happy because those were leads for my team. So as the commercial end of me really didn't care which audience was engaged in, I was really happy that I suddenly had some leads for my team. But as I stepped back, I thought, well, hold on a moment. We're celebrating over engaging successfully with our paid exhibitors, not our exhibitors' distinct buyer personas. So, a part of me thinks, well, maybe we should have spent our time a little bit more wisely and actually zoned in on those distinct buyer personas for our exhibitors and tried to increase the metrics from 7,000 to something like 22,000, as opposed to going for something easy and celebrating when did that really make a difference to our community? No, it made a difference to us. But, did it really do what we set out to do? I would say no.
Yeah, and I mean, making a difference is something that's come across from the chats we've had beforehand. Sam, we talked about NPS, didn't we? And I came up with a headline: NPS is dead. Don't use it anymore. And I think that's a bit too far out for you. But there is something in, always looking at certain metrics, like you were saying, Cara. And then at some point, after a few years, you've got to go, well, let's challenge ourselves. Should we be still using that same metric? And I suppose the same, Sam, goes for NPS. And are you looking in the rearview mirror and you're just celebrating a metric, which you can't really affect? You can't really change it. If it's an annual event, you've got your NPS. What are you really going to do with that for another 11 months? And you've come up with some quite interesting metrics when you're helping organizers to acquire shows, haven't you? It'd be lovely for you to talk a bit about that, and also maybe talk about the surveys you're doing, because surveys are still have a place, I think. But behavior metrics, I do think, is the gold standard. But yeah, if you could speak a bit about NPS, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. And I think, it might sound overly simple, but if from a starting perspective, if you're looking at customer satisfaction metrics, you have to have a really clear idea of what is your objective of what you're trying to get out of collecting metrics. Are you just doing a post-show survey to show that you've asked some questions, but you're not going to take any actions from it? Are you trying to show, are you trying to understand how you compare to your peers? Are you trying to understand actions to take to fix problems? Are you trying to understand the indication of your future performance? And, absolutely, this is relevant for those when they're looking for acquisitions, but it's also relevant for organizers looking at their own shows, and those both being different perspectives on the same set of metrics. You could be that, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of if I think of exhibition trade shows, a lot of them are going to be focused on some form of ROI for those participants, that are the kind of the marketeer exhibitors. But asking a direct question on ROI may not necessarily make sense if you are there for networking or branding, or even, I think kind of correctly, a lot of organizers will have skepticism that you'll get the right answer from when you're asking your participants. There's an understanding that if I give a great feedback on ROI, that my prices are probably going to go up. And so what are the other ways in which you can get indicators of satisfaction or value? I think NPS is very widely used, and so it can be useful to measure yourself against others. And there's lots of public sources of other NPSs in the industry that are useful to benchmark yourself. So I wouldn't dismiss it as a metric. The problem with it is if you want to really just demonstrate commercial outcomes, it brings in too many other things. If you think of an exhibitor marketer and they're deciding about coming back next time, I think there's very, very few circumstances where they and their team are genuinely going to ask each other, would I recommend this to a peer or colleague? They're going to talk about the leads or the quality of the audience or something that indicates the ROI that they've got from it. I think if you can get to a measure that you feel you're comfortable with in the definition and it being consistent, and that it can demonstrate a commercial outcome, and you can see how that tracks from year to year, that's when you're going to feel the most confident in that measure. For us personally, we like to make sure, to a point I mentioned before, that if you understand your participants' objectives and their performance on the show's performance on those objectives and how that compares to peers, that can be really powerful, because it's getting right to the nub of the question of, did you achieve what you came here to do? It may be commercial, it may be more career development oriented, but can you prove that this show has delivered on your objectives? And sometimes for a phrasing that's quite kind of pervasive across both industries and geographies, value for money can be used as an alternative for ROI, because it means a slightly more holistic, or even return on time for those where it's not being paid for. Those can just point a little bit more directly to an outcome, such that you have a true understanding of what you're going to do with it. If you have a negative 50 NPS, absolutely investigate it, because it probably does mean you need to fix something. But if you have a plus 10 NPS and a plus 20 NPS show, that doesn't mean that the other show is going to grow faster than the other. It might just mean that the catering went a bit worse on one day. And so to make sure that you're really understanding about forward-looking indicators, things that can really indicate leadership, for example, leadership, it was obviously often a massive part for investors to understand that you've got confidence in that show being a leader in its field and that it's going to have a positive outlook. Criticality is often something that people think about as being an indicator of leadership, but you should be conscious that if there's a newly launched event that's in its only second event, it may be fantastic, it may be delivering extremely well on objectives, but it can't be described as critical. It's the second time someone's ever gone to it. How could that be critical to their career when it didn't exist before? So again, I think for us, we really like to nail down what are those objectives, and are these shows meeting those objectives for all the participants? I know that we've said before, as a group, if you can get the attendee buyers happy, in general, you're going to have a product there to sell to someone. So as long as you can prove out that those attendees are really able to achieve their objectives, then you're in a great starting place. And again, that because you're focusing on attendees, which not all shows are paid for, brings you back to the point where ROI isn't always the perfect measure. There's what's the closest we can get to proving their commercial or career outcomes as being metrics that we tend to try and use. And then to your point before, if there are metrics like an NPS that are more, benchmarkable, for want of a better word, then great, because you can at least understand where you're standing, but it may not give you as actionable insights as other metrics.
So go on then, say I'm an event director watching this webinar right now. What are some of the questions that I should be posing to my participants? So for example, say I'm an exhibitor and I've paid to exhibit at your show, and what I wanted at that show was leads. You're obviously surveying these people to find out if the show is valuable enough for another organizer to buy the show. What are some of these questions that you're asking? Just some practical questions that event organizers could put in their surveys tomorrow.
If you were to keep it to like 5, what is your key objective? Great, it's lead generation. how's the show performed on your objective of lead generation on as basic as a 1 to 5 scale, where 5's as good as it could be and 1's as bad as it can be. How does that compare to the other shows you go to? Then, has the show delivered on value for money? And probably the last one, how important is this show? How must-have is it? And for us, we often do it as would you say this is must-have, nice to have, or not important? And if you get that, you get a pretty good understanding of how your show is going to compare to others. You have an understanding, as you might be able to get an indication as whether you have pricing leverage. You have an understanding as to their overall satisfaction. It will miss out if you're to just do those 5, so that's probably a bit too small, but that you might miss out on some of the more operational points, which may come in the rest of the survey, again, depending on your objectives as an organizer. But if you're just purely going for, do I think that the show is delivering on participant objectives and how it might compare to other events in that space, that's a good starting place.
So from ROI, sorry, go on, Cara, go on, sorry.
I was listening to Sam and I thought, oh, are we talking about the exhibitor or the buyer? I was just thinking, well, I've already said that I'm not a fan of surveys, so I have to keep to that. But I'm a great fan of always having a connections program or a hosted buyer program at the show, because surveys are great for general indicators, but if you can actually spend time with the buyer and talk to them one-on-one and help curate their own experiences, that's just food for your marketing effort, for you to say, look, we had this buyer here, they did X amount of business, this is we are their must to have, because to Sam's point, what's the must to have? You don't need a lot of people responding to create a great story. So if you're really zoning in on your buyers, or maybe it's not a buyer seller dynamic, maybe it's a connections program that you want to do, that's going to give you a lot of insight and a lot of things that you can use for your marketing to justify why you're here and why your ROI is strong. And then to come onto that, I was just thinking, well, having spoken to a lot of exhibitors, very few of them come in with any standard KPI in terms of what they want to achieve at the show. It's shocking how few will say X amount of meetings or X amount of leads is the gold standard for what I want to achieve from this show. So again, thinking about where we are as event organisers, if you've got the buyers and you can curate that story and you can actually showcase by name who you have there. On the other side, you can provide guidance to exhibitors, using the metrics that we have in these platforms now to say, well, the average show success criteria can be X amount of meetings or X amount of leads, set your KPI. So again, that might sound a bit bold to give that kind of intel and power to all your exhibitors, but it's just offering another way for you to say, well, actually, I can see through, the digitally enabled event platforms that we're running, you've had X amount of meetings booked, you've had X amount of leads, you set a goal of 50, you achieved 70. That's amazing. Tell me more. Let's make this even better for you at the next show. So again, I think there's something to be said about flipping these KPIs towards also the exhibitors and saying, this is what you should be aiming for. These are some of the markers you should be measuring your success on. Let us help you. And again, using prompts to say, you're almost there. Set up another meeting. Here's another lead for you. Someone just engaged with your content. Connect with them now. There is so much potential that we can do to empower our exhibitors with this data as well. That if you're connecting with buyers and you've got that beautiful story, and then you're empowering your exhibitors with the KPIs that actually you're looking at, that's a really strong statement to go to market with. And that's a great story that just enables you to get to those additional targets that you as an exhibitor, as an event organizer want.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, I think, what Cara's saying, like a lot of the marketing and like the slogans that people are still using in event organizers is still like 1,000 exhibitors, 100,000 visitors. All of that is just like, the honest truth is like no one cares. Like everyone's got volume, everyone's got exhibitor numbers, and we're still seeing these like videos and creatives with like them thinking that these are like the main stats, but it's really like what Cara was saying, like if you're trying to market to exhibitors to get more exhibitor sales in and leads in for exhibitors to come to your event, it's like, what is your actual extended USPs? Like what's different to your event? Like like Cara was saying, how many meetings are actually being booked? Like, what business are people actually doing at these events? Like, that's what people want to know, not that like last year you had 100,000 visitors, because that means nothing. Like, the quality of that could have been low. Just because you've got volume doesn't mean it's going to be effective for you as like an exhibitor at an event. So I think it's, yeah, like really honing in when it, taking that data and using that from a marketing messaging when it comes to your creatives of like, how are you attracting this audience through these unique USPs rather than just relying on these like big, bold statistics that are kind of outdated now?
Well, it's got to be this quality over quantity game, because that's what I'm seeing in the market. The smart organizers are really doubling down on the quality rather than the quantity. And I think I'd love to hear, Nicola, you speak a bit about, examples of organizers that are actually pushing the quality metrics in their marketing, because, all you have to do is look at a really top tier organizer who we work with, a group called Essential. They do Money 2020, Cannes Lions. Look at one of their press releases for Money 2020. They're obviously a publicly listed company and they have to publish information to the markets. The top line headline stat for Money 2020 is 12,000 meetings booked. That's their like North Star metric for that show. Not, we had 120,000 people through our doors. And I think you're all right. When it comes down to big numbers, people see through those now. Actually, what they care about is the value metric, and the value at these huge ecosystem shows are people actually meeting? Are they doing deals? I keep coming back to Web Summit in 2016. That's where Uber did their first round of investment. That was their claim to fame. The meetings happened, the deals were done, and you can showcase that ROI, like you were saying, Cara. So, Nicola, what are some of the examples of these quality metrics that are being used by certain organizers, and which shows? Can you name names?
I mean, the ones that do it well are normally the ones that have a large price attached to the ticket, because sometimes quantity isn't always the luxury there. If you're selling tickets that are like $12,000 to an event and things like that, for an example is Ted, whose ticket price is that we work with, who really needs to go in on quality over quantity. And the way that like examples like that do it really well is really the unique messaging. The benefit that's happening now is personalization is getting a lot easier thanks to the luxury that AI is bringing in on the platforms, as you are now being able to a lot easier put specific messages to specific users and specific buyers and specific people, which is helping a lot with improving the quality of the kind of engagement rates that are happening. I think a lot of people, of event organizers, are still stuck in the past and looking at conversion numbers, like how many pre-reg numbers are coming in, looking for that mass like scale. And when it comes to it, especially when it comes to exhibitor lead generation, they're too focused on how many of the volume is coming in rather than switching and thinking of, okay, what's actually the quality? So what's like the conversion rate of your lead to sale when it comes to your exhibitor lead generation, and what's actually the pre-reg numbers of how many people pre-registered through your marketing that actually then attended, is normally a statistic that a lot of people forget to analyze when it comes to their year-on-year data. It's like, okay, so we spent X amount on Google advertising last year. They just go, okay, we got 5,000 pre-registers last year. This year we want 8,000. And I'm normally like, well, how many of those Google people actually attended? Is that the platform we still want to push value into, we still want to put money onto? So it's a huge statistic that needs to be looked at, because one platform that's making a lot of changes right now is Meta, and sometimes the quality there isn't amazing. So it's looking at, yes, you could get 20,000 pre-registrations from Meta, but is the quality of the registrations actually the people that are attending and the people that are doing business when they attend? To really analyze what marketing platforms you should be using. Other things also is people are not paying attention to looking at, when it comes to their marketing, how much of your marketing is coming from new data compared to how much of it is coming from remarketing to your existing audience. Your existing audience is obviously very valuable. You want to keep them engaged throughout the year and not just in the run up to the event. But every year you should be looking at how much new data growth am I getting year on year? are you splitting out like your marketing campaigns? So you're doing a specific campaign to get new people in compared to the remarketing, because that is one thing a lot of event organizers, Informa being one of them, and Emerald another, that are putting large focuses on new data targets. So there's targets in place for how much volume of new data they're actually getting in, because we're about to move into a world where remarketing is no longer going to be a thing. You're not going to be able to rely on third party going forward. So that data is the most valuable asset that you can have right now. So making sure that you're focusing on a metric that is new data is really important if you want to see growth and improve the quality that's coming into your events.
And Nicola, to your point, I think you need to see data as the new currency.
Yes.
It's really valuable.
Yeah, I say it's more valuable than oil. That's my everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's so true. And again, as event organisers, we probably don't value it enough.
Yeah.
Because we're going for the volume. And I attended a show a couple of weeks ago. Been in the industry a long time. It was an established brand. They were celebrating that pre-reg shot up. But then when I went to speak to the exhibitors, they were saying, well, actually, day one was dominated by sellers.
Yeah.
Not buyers. So, you know, again, to your point, Nicola, that value of, woohoo, big pre-reg numbers, love it. Actually, what's that value coming on site? Because you spent all your time and effort acquiring that, and it's not valuable. So again, data is really the new currency. And audience growth, absolutely. You know, we were seeing, again, CPHI is a 30-year-old plus brand, dominates the pharma market. But through webinar engagement content, we were seeing 56% increase in new audience data. And that's phenomenal to think that a brand that long-standing can make such inroads through specialized content. And that was a real light bulb moment for us as we were coming through COVID, that actually there was so much more to be gained through content advertising, content marketing, to actually make sure that the right people are coming together, because that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, it's all about bringing the right people together. And I'm glad I've got three of the brightest minds in the world on this topic on this webinar. We are going to wrap this up, but I've got one last rapid fire question, which I want to pose to all our panelists, which is, what's your favorite metric? And a bonus point, if you can do it, is where would you get that metric from? So I think my favorite metric at the moment is something we've got in the Grit platform, which we've got a kind of insights tool called Pulse, which is around looking at the networking gaps. So what are your exhibitors trying to sell? And then what are your attendees looking for? And this metric is quite interesting because we can see there's a lot of people, a lot of buyers looking for something, but we haven't got enough exhibitors. So we could turn to someone like you, Nicola, and do a big campaign, acquisition campaign, to get the gaps minimized so you've got perfect equilibrium between buyers and sellers. And that's something we can do with our matchmaking platform, because we use something called custom profile fields. So, you know, you can actually find out what people are really interested in and why they're coming to your event and what objectives they have. So really making sure the kind of balance of scales is absolutely perfect so that you get the right buyers and suppliers meeting. That's my favorite metric at the moment because it's all quite new and lots of our organizers are using it. Sam, what's your favorite metric and how do you find it?
I was going to be annoying and come up with a favorite metric in different types, if that's all right. I'm cheating a little bit here. I think if we're going feedback for kind of surveys, customer interviews, then probably the basic answer would be value for money. Where my tricky answer was going to be was the importance of segmenting your feedback, not just looking at a straight answer, but making sure that you're understanding how the feedback on that metric is differing for your different audiences to make sure you're not just taking one answer straight off the bat. And then my very much cheating of having another answer was going to be, if you ignored the customer feedback side and went pure data that we have, you know, that both Nicola and Cara have been talking about, I think anything that informs intent data, so anything that's interactions with marketing materials, anything that's coming back that indicates what people have actually been doing, so you don't even have to ask them, then gets you another step up.
Brilliant. Well done. You've managed to get lots of metrics in there. Nicola, what's your favorite metric and how do you find it?
I mean, hard as I live in a world of metrics and a digital platform, but I would say at the moment, because it's ignored quite heavily, is probably click-through rate. I think everyone's so conversion focused, cost per acquisition focused, and a lot of the time with click-through rate, which you can find across any advertisement that you're doing, also organic, you can see it. You can also see it in terms of anything that you're posting out. What is the click-through rate of sending people to your landing page? A lot of people, when they think digital campaigns aren't working, they think, well, we must be targeting the wrong audience. Something must be wrong with the audience, or the job titles we're targeting, the companies we're targeting. But really, is the audience actually engaging with the content that you're pushing out? Is your creative strong enough that you're encouraging people to actually click onto your website and engage? And I think it's a metric that people look over and oversee, but it's the most powerful one, because when it comes to marketing, the most powerful thing at the moment is the content that you're pushing out, is the videos, is the creative. So focusing on click-through rate is actually how you see, is your content valuable to the audience that you're pushing out? And if it's not, then it needs to change.
Wonderful, valuable content. We can all get behind that. And finally, Cara, what's your favorite metric and where do you find it?
There's a 365 metric, which is KEMA. So again, looking at your known and engaged marketable audience and how strong you are there. I would say that there's no industry standard for what the ideal KEMA metric is. That's where you need to go to the community that you're talking to and ask them, how they're engaging online, how frequently, how much they research in a vendor before they go to market. That will give you a KEMA metric to work towards. But it's definitely looking at that from a marketing perspective, 365. And then when it comes to live on site, that live behavioral data for me is critical. It's looking at, again, how can you quantify the value? It's the meetings. How many touch points or connections has an exhibitor had through their virtual element of their booth to give you an indication of what they're experiencing on site? So again, I really love looking at that live behavioral data and making sure that our event teams are empowered and they know what's happening in general, or for a specific exhibitor, because that enriches their, again, I'm commercial, so that enriches their rebook conversation as well. So it's, how much activity is happening for that exhibitor that you can actually say, you're having a great show because you've got X amount of meetings booked and in the diary, and I'm sure you're having more on site. Tell me about that. So those are my two favorites.
Fantastic. And I'm glad you mentioned Rebook, because I'm going to come back to my sponsored message, which is our next webinar all about churn, challenging churn, solve your participant churn issues before it's too late. And this one's ice cream themed. The theme is your ice cream. It's absolutely beautiful. You're licking it, but there's bits melting and going on your lovely clean clothes. And so even though you've got this amazing event, there's stuff dripping away at the seams, and your exhibitors, sponsors, even attendees can churn. And it's a real problem. So have you got your churn licked? If not, we need to get them coming back, all your participants, not just your attendees, but your exhibitors and your sponsors. We need to get them forming an orderly queue to get lots of your lovely ice cream, aka your show. So join us on the 22nd of May for that one. All that it remains for me to say is thank you very much to my lovely participants. You've all been amazing. Got lots of great insights there. Nicola, how can people find out about you? How can they contact you if they want to hear more from Tag Digital?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or drop me an email at nicola@tagdigital.co.uk.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And Sam, how do they contact you?
So LinkedIn for me, and then by email at sam.feary@pluralstrategy.com.
And then Cara, can people hit you up on LinkedIn?
I'm afraid so, yes. I'm bringing nothing new to the table. LinkedIn or cara.turner@integratestrategies.com.
And you've got a website all about what you do, haven't you, Cara, where people can kind of find out and mine all your amazing knowledge about your background that you got from when you were at Informa Markets. Lovely. Well, that was really informative. I mean, we're going to take lots of snippets from that and share them on social. There are so many that we can get from that webinar. It's unreal. So thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the 22nd. Cheers. See you later. Bye-bye.